Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. Andy, this trailer, they gave it was the cardinal sin, I think. It has become the cardinal sin, maybe. They revealed the underwear in the trailer, Andy.
Yes. Yes, they did. How dare they?
Alice Eve's big Starfleet-issued underwear reveal that ended up being a sequence of some revulsion to many Star Trek fans.
But, other than that, I don't know. I didn't think the trailer was bad. I actually was like, I felt like the trailer pushed it in a direction where I didn't know really where it was going. I didn't get any hint about it being kind of a, the Kelvin timeline story about Khan.
You didn't?
No, it's pretty hidden from the trailer, don't you think?
No.
You think that they reveal it?
Well, okay. The trailer that is linked in our show notes is the first international trailer. And I forgive me, I didn't actually look at the first domestic trailer. But the trailer I watched, at the end, we have Harrison, and he says, "I'm better than everyone, or all of you, or whatever." And that just reeked of Khan to me. It just reeked of enough Khan that this. I feel like I knew, and that was my big question for you. Did you have a sense that this was Khan? Did you know, had it been spoiled for you, that it was Khan going in? I don't remember if it was spoiled to me, but I do remember that impending sense of doom that they were doing a Khan story.
Well, they had been, from the time they started development, I mean, they had talked about, it might, we might have Khan in it. We might have the Klingons. There had been a lot of random talk with no commitment to the bad guy. And so it had been floating around for quite a while. Oh, they're redoing Khan. And I think that it kind of, I won't say that the rumors went away, but I don't think there was really any confirmation. And then I think it made it even more confusing when IMDb finally got the cast list up and Benedict Cumberbatch was not listed as Khan, but listed as whatever his name is, John Harrison.
John Harrison, yeah.
And so people were like, oh, okay, so it's not Khan. And I think that kind of was like, oh, okay. And so I think by the time, when you watch the trailer, I guess I didn't really, I was like, I think there was enough talk like, ooh, that might be a code name. And, so I think a lot of people were like, oh, it's probably still Khan. And so I think in the back of my head, I was like, well, it's probably Khan in this storyline. But I guess when I saw the trailer, I'm like, well, at least it looks like they're not just redoing the Wrath of Khan. It looked like if it is going to be Khan, at least it's going to be something kind of different.
Did that bug you?
It did. It made me feel like, why do they feel they have to go back to Khan? I mean, that was my biggest gripe with this, is like, why can't they do something original? They have a whole new timeline now. Why go back to one of the best of the franchise films and retell the story? And I think that kind of was frustrating to me. And I think that even like when it came out, JJ said something was like, oh, well, it was one of those things where if we didn't do it, people would be asking why we didn't. And I was like, I don't think people would be asking that
I don't think that's the question. I really, I feel very strongly that wouldn't be the question.
Yeah.
I can think of a lot of other questions.
Yeah, exactly. But that was not ever one of them.
Never one.
No,
never even on that list. I feel like it does some frustrating trailer things. It does give away. I mean, now we're in this era of the Kelvin timeline. We're in an era of JJ Abrams, effects-driven Trek films, and here, they do a big work of art effect sequence, and they give it right away in the trailer, and that. I found that pretty frustrating on this end, knowing that they kind of have to do it. I feel like if this is going to be that kind of film, they're gonna show us the destruction of, or at least the entree into the destruction of San Francisco. But I feel like showing that ship doing that kind of damage in the trailer was a miss for me.
Well, that didn't bug me because I thought it was at least a nice surprise that it wasn't the Enterprise. So to me, because in the trailer, I'm like, oh, the Enterprise gets destroyed again.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a difference in at least the teaser. They show a ship that looks like the Enterprise, on fire and blistering down, and we do see that shot of it falling through the clouds.
Right.
And now we see in this trailer, we see that it's actually clearly not the Enterprise. It's careening down over Alcatraz.
Yeah,
which is good.
I guess I've gotten to a point with some trailers like for these big budget movies where, I mean, we first had this conversation about them giving away this big point in a trailer way back in First Contact when they give away the shot of the Borg Queen with the top of her body coming down and joining the rest of her body, and it's just become such a thing now since the mid-90s that the studios are like, if you're gonna put the money into it, you got to show it, because if that means getting more butts in the seats and making the difference between a profit and a loss, then we need to do it. And I feel like that's the way the big budget trailers operate, and essentially I would say that's kind of how the world of the trailer marketing machine has shifted. And so I guess I've just kind of been resigned to the fact that that's how it is. Exactly. So the trailer was fine. I enjoyed it and everything. And I guess I just wasn't disappointed by any of those things anymore.
I am an island.
You think your world is safe. It is an illusion. Enjoy these final moments of peace.
By now, all of you have heard what happened in London. Man who did it is one of our top agents.
Your commanders have committed a crime I cannot forgive. None of you are safe.
Clear the road!
This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Andy Nelson.
Hey.
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, the penultimate film in our epic Trek experience. JJ Abrams is back with 2013's Star Trek Into Darkness. Before we get into that, you should learn more about us at thenextreel.com. Subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, or follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel.
And if you enjoy the show and are interested in supporting our ongoing work investigating great film, please consider a regular donation through our Patreon page. You'll get to join our back-channel conversations on Slack, listen to the members-only weekend show, and get better chances of being part of our Listener's Choice episodes. Just head on over to patreon.com/thenextreel. And speaking of the Listener's Choice episode, Pete, we have another one coming up. It's going to be at the end of November. It's right after our next series, which is all about South American actor Ricardo Darín.
Outstanding.
Yeah, so in fact, I think we're doing our drawing next week.
Oh, dear. I'm ill-prepared. What shall I wear?
I'd say a silk pajamas.
Okay, day wear it is. Whatever you suggest.
Yeah, listeners just need to head on over to Facebook where we have a post about it, and they can reply to that if they're interested in entering to pick the next movie for us to talk about on our next Listener's Choice episode. Or they can tweet to us with #PonyPrize. Just make sure you do so before October 23rd when we do the drawing.
Everything is bigger in this movie, Andy. Bigger Enterprise, constructed on fewer sets, means more great practical shots in and around the Enterprise and the bridge. It just feels good. There are so many great opportunities for digital trickery. There's a lot of cleverness going on in JJ's hands here, and yet I still feel unfulfilled. Am I alone?
No, you're not alone. It's frustrating. I mean, I don't know why they felt they had to go back to the Khan story. I mean, I understand we are back in a different timeline now, and Khan is this element that's out there in the world still. I don't think they're on the Botany Bay, but they are certainly still, kind of cryogenically frozen people that basically are, I mean, they never mentioned that they are from the, what was it called again? The genetic wars of
the eugenics wars of like 1996 or something.
Right. They never mentioned the eugenics wars,
yeah.
but theoretically it's the same people. And I'm assuming that in reality, this movie is not even taking the Kelvin version of Wrath of Khan. It really is more the Kelvin version of pre-Space Seed, because it's before they really start going off on their 5-year mission. So this is really early in the timeline. And I don't know. It's just I appreciate that Khan is this critical character in the Trek world, but it's been done, and it's been done well. Why go back to the well to try to recreate something? It was very frustrating for me. That
is my central frustration too, and it colors everything about how I look at this movie. That this is an absence of creative thinking, and I hear the team talking about how, oh man, we must have written and rewritten this story. This is Roberto and Alex Kurtzman and David Lindelof. We must have been written this story 50 times, and finally the story broke. Finally, this is what we came up with, and I just can't help but sigh. This is what you came up with after having the enormous opportunity of a brand new Star Trek timeline. This is what you came up with? This is your best work?
Exactly. Why not do something unique, something exciting and original? And they didn't. And that, to me, was their biggest failing. Now, I can understand the idea of, taking this whole idea of terrorism and bringing it into the Trek universe, making it very timely with our current society and everything. And you don't necessarily know who your enemy is, and is the is the enemy of your friend or your enemy? Like all of this sort of stuff.
Star Trek frenemies. See, you
Coming
came
soon
up
on the
with,
WB.
with better material, and you didn't even have to rewrite the script 50 times.
Exactly. No, it's just, I don't know. It's funny because just like you, it's like I can see this film for what they have in it, and I can go, okay, I can see what they were doing, and I can appreciate it on that level, and I can understand why people who didn't have a history of Star Trek before coming into this film can really enjoy this film. But I feel like people who are Star Trek fans or have been following the franchise and the movies and everything, when they come to this one, I can't help but feel like they're going to feel slighted in some way.
Yeah. And I mean, I asked my kids, what do you think of it? And they love this. They love all three of the JJ movies. They're exhilarating. They're cotton candy movies, right? I mean, they're fast paced. They move quickly. The characters are big and blustery, and they're all great. But my kids also love the original Star Trek movies too. And TNG, like they are in really genuine competition with one another, and yet they still love that Khan was back. They love that Khan is there and that he's fun, and they don't think much about all the other stuff that you and I are rambling on about. The problem that I have with it is it's more of a disappointment in the creative team than in this Star Trek. Had this been, let's say, the story that they came up with out of Brandon Braga and Ron Moore, I might have been less disappointed than I am now, because I could see that coming from them. I could see that happening. But this is a team that prizes themselves through TED Talks and all this stuff about the mystery box, and we're going to do things. We love the surprises and all the ya and the wa da do da. And I got none of that in this movie. It is a letdown of a philosophical scale. It just makes me sad. It makes me sad because there's huge opportunity to do something brand new, to do something bold, like the Dominion bold. Like, let's introduce some new villain that we haven't heard of that does something grand of big scale and tries to do something and start a war, man. Like really, let's go crazy. And they failed. And you know what else, Andy? I think I can pick up on your what you were saying. Like, I understand how they want to bring in terrorism, and there's this. I really think this brilliant introduction, right? This grim specter of terrorism and humanity is at question, and we've got Harrison approaches Harwood, and the opening sequence over this beautiful Giacchino piano ballad introducing Harrison. The Harrison theme is just gorgeous. Everything about this sequence works. When we see Harrison, he's mourning, the illness of his daughter. We believe, we're led to believe just by the overall sort of sentiment and the color and everything just screams that this is a terminal condition. He's going to lose his daughter, and then Harrison says, "I can save her." And we see that there is some sort of a deal, and then Harwood, in exchange, the daughter gets better. Harwood goes and blows up the library, right? And that I actually love the feel of that. I love what it introduces to this movie. And you know what I didn't need to make this successful? I didn't need Harrison to be Khan. I don't care. They've already set up the specter of terrorism and the grim take on humanity in this story. It could have been a new character. Like, we didn't need to we could have explored more without the whole genetic thing and without the whole 72 myth. Like, we didn't need, they could have written around that. And that part I find really disappointing. Great setup, terrible payoff.
Especially because, it feels like the entire mystery box idea that Abrams and his team had come up with, as far as this film goes, is the fact that Harrison is Khan. Like, that was like the big reveal in the movie, was when he's just like, I am Noonien Khan or whatever, Khan Noonien Singh. It's like that was the big mystery box reveal. And it's like, that's what they were saving this whole thing up for. It's like, that's not what you use the mystery box for. It became really flat. Going off your point though, I will say, you're right. If they had left it John Harrison and just that was it. It was just this terrorist who was kind of he was. I even leave the whole story. I mean, you could drop the entire Khan thing and just have him. He is this pawn of Marcus, and he's being used, and he's going to get back at him. And I mean, it all works still.
It does.
But what I like about that is like. What I feel like these guys tapped into well, as far as the whole concept of Star Trek, is this idea of Roddenberry's future. I feel like they have done a good job, unlike Nicholas Meyers, as much as I enjoy his films, of pulling away from the militaristic future. And they essentially turned it into like the essential conflict in this and in even the next film, really, of this idea that this story is about this soldier, this guy who this commander, this, what is he, Admiral? Is he an Admiral?
He's an Admiral
Marcus?
Right, Admiral Marcus.
Who can't let go of war and feels like that he needs to get that back. And so he's kind of pushing all this stuff to happen. And he's trying to push Starfleet into a path that is more militaristic and much more aggressive. And here we are seeing our crew of the Enterprise fighting against that to preserve kind of the Roddenberry future. And I think that's a great idea to have in this script. But unfortunately, it's the Khan thing that muddles it all up.
I think so too. I think you're absolutely right. And I think, even though the Vengeance, the giant, the USS Vengeance is I love the way they talk about the Vengeance, especially in context with the Enterprise, that it is the anti-Enterprise. It is quite literally the anti-Enterprise when you look at the production design. Like, they literally just took the bridge of the Enterprise and painted it black and added more cool lights and purple. But it's the same bones of the Enterprise, and you can, if you look closely, you can see it. You can see how they redressed the Enterprise to be the Vengeance. And I think that there's a sort of beauty in that parallelism, like in what that represents, that this Vengeance is what happens when Roddenberry turns his back, and the scale and the size of that ship has ballooned so huge in this film, and that still little Enterprise, little Roddenberry's sort of aesthetic has to go up against it, I think is really, it's just wonderful. It's a wonderful sort of balance of power. Or out of power that we have in this film, and it just loses its way in this muddled Khan thing. And this is not Cumberbatch's best performance by a long shot. Like, I find his Khan to be positively cartoonish. Did they unhinge his jaw? Do you know? I mean, everything he says is his mouth. It's like he's trying to swallow a Volkswagen. It's way too easy to lampoon. This is just the wrong direction for the character. Let's just say we leave the character in the movie. I found it very challenging to watch.
And it's funny because I was noticing that too with the way that his mouth was moving. It's just like there's something about the way he was enunciating all of his words, and he's being very rigid. I didn't mind the rigidity, but there was something with his mouth that was a little strange. So
I think so too. Now, can we go through? I have this list of crap. Can I go through my list of crap?
Let's go through the list of crap.
Number 1, is Pike a trusted administrative leader anymore?
You mean the fact that he still kind of tells Kirk to shut up and stuff?
He does, and then he says, "Shut up! We're going to take your ship away. You did something terrible. You're demonstrably a terrible captain based on all of the rules and all of the everything." And yet, the better angels have stepped in and they've said, you need to go back to the academy, presumably for some a little bit of retread work, training, and instead he says, I have a lot of faith in you, and I think you're going to be great anyway. So I want you to be my second officer, even though you did all this terrible stuff that I just a few minutes ago told you was unforgivable. I'm now going to forgive it.
Yeah, there's a little bit of sloppy writing.
I had a hard time. Just a little bit of sloppy writing here. Okay. Khan retread we've already talked about. Okay, Andy, I want this to be this is a pedestal for you because I know you've been waiting on it. Transwarp beaming, damn it.
So I was getting confused last week when we were talking about my nerd questions and the distance of beaming and everything, because it seems like the distance that they're beaming, there's this point in the previous film where they kind of pop out of the clouds around the rings of Saturn or something like that. And then they beam from their hiding place there. They beam into Nero's ship, right?
Yes.
From the rings of Saturn.
Yes.
That's a really impressive distance to beam. Like, that's like halfway across our little solar system. More than halfway.
Yes.
That's insane. And then they introduce this whole idea of transwarp beaming, which apparently Scotty designs so that you can beam into something while it's going through warp, which obviously that's an incredibly fast speed, and now they can beam into that now. So that's, I guess, impressive as far as what they're accomplishing for the last film. But now in this film, we have this moment where Khan transwarp beams out of his ship that he's in as he's assassinating all of the heads of the Federation. Basically a Godfather 3 style assassination is what we have going on there. And he beams all the way to the Klingon homeworld of Kronos, and via transwarp beaming somehow.
That's right.
Why do they have spaceships, Pete?
Well, I asked my daughter that same question, and she said, so they can float around in space. If they didn't have spaceships, they wouldn't be able to be in space. They would either be at their destination or at their source. They would never be able to see the in-betweens.
That sounds like something a teenager would say.
Well, you have to admit, it's a fairly good point if you really are Roddenberry-esque explorers. Now, I think that transwarp beaming is also dumb, and it makes me mad, mostly just because it is a ridiculous plot device that they just didn't need. I feel like they could have written around that. I know they wanted to get us to the Klingon homeworld. I question whether or not introducing the Klingons in this movie was a great idea.
Question how useless that whole thing was. It was so unnecessary.
And if you go ahead and allow your own better angels to step in and say, you know what, let's go ahead and cut this Klingon sequence, even though we have the pancake ship and everybody gets to wear their civvies, and we think that's really cool. If we cut the Klingon sequence, we could maybe come up with another way for Harrison to get to beam to someplace that's a little bit more reasonable and have a little bit more of a mystery that doesn't involve nonsense and characters that we're going to give short shrift no matter what we do with them on screen.
Not to mention the fact that I was so irritated when I saw the Klingon, because I don't know. I feel like Klingon,
I'm actually curious about this. Why were you? What irritated you about the Klingon?
It just didn't look like they were. It looked like they were fiddling around with the looks of all of the great work that had been done on the looks of the Klingons up to this point. They took it into a direction that is like, and now we're going into a direction that I'm not happy with. Like, I preferred all the previous Klingons. All of a sudden, we've got, I don't know, just much more.
A lot of piercing. These are really punk rock Klingons. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just didn't really like the look of these new Klingons.
Yeah, it's grim.
We should mention, Pete, for those who are thinking that they might join Patreon, we are going to be doing our little list. Inspired by the transwarp beaming, we're going to be doing our list of our 3 favorite moments in a movie that where a ridiculous piece of sci-fi machinery was used to further the plot.
I can't wait. I can't wait. Okay, I have to talk about women in this movie with a subchapter entitled Spockhura.
Okay.
I am very frustrated with the way the women characters were written in this movie. They have just devolved. We went from, I thought, a great introduction of Uhura in the last movie to now we introduce another pivotal woman in the principal cast, and she is reduced to underwear model, which is totally distracting from the other good work that Alice Eve can do and does on screen. And I just hate that. It was useless. It was silly. It was ridiculous. And you can go back to Star Trek, the first movie, where we have the underwear scene there too. And I didn't complain enough about it then. But I think it was because it felt even, right? Everybody was in their underwear in that sequence. It was off of a love scene, and everybody got in their underwear, and it was great. I mean, it's fine. People look good in their underwear. But this one felt really objective, and it frustrated me because it was pointless. So I didn't like that. And subcategory Spockhura, she became not I think a valued member of the Enterprise leadership team. She became a pawn in a ridiculous relationship with the Spock that did not go anywhere. I mean, it didn't mature. It didn't feel like it moved in any direction beyond. They were kind of getting it on in the last movie. We better find a way to shoehorn some lines in about that.
Not to mention, it really turns their relationship into this situation where Spock is out fighting frequently, and she's like the worried wife back at home.
Yep. And boy, that starts immediately.
Yeah, it sure does, right in our first sequence. And just another side note on the bit of women and just how women are treated in this film. I've got to say, I right out of the gate when we first, not when we first see Kirk, but when we see him after the whole opening sequence, he's having a threesome. And I'm just like,
yeah, God, you're
why
right.
are we starting here?
Yeah.
I understand that Kirk is, a lover, but this is the place we're kicking it off with for him in this one, especially in the one where he's meeting the woman who theoretically is the woman that was the mother of his child in the non-Kelvin timeline.
Exactly. I know they're trying to paint this picture of this ne'er-do-well here, but I think they missed a huge opportunity. And it feels like they were pushing at that opportunity, right? Which is now we get a chance to see how the crew gets to mature. We know they were all sort of young and they were thrust into this position, and now we get to see kind of how they mature into it. And the ultimate sort of narrative, or Kirk's narrative, he pushes at this occasionally, where you have his moment with Spock. He says, "I'm leaving. I'm going to go do this one thing because this is the thing I know how to do, and you know how to be on the bridge of that ship. You need to go do that." Because he's just riddled with self-doubt. But that narrative was more like a perforation, a very slight perforation over the course of this movie, and it just never really materialized into an interesting character development. I never got the feeling that I was rewarded by his journey out and back. It always felt like Kirk, the ego, driven by action and no consequence and no conscience, and therefore no change.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Marcus and the Vengeance. I know that we've already sort of talked about this, but I guess it was only a matter of time before they introduce another admiral and crew in Starfleet that'll show up willing to get friendly blood on their hands, right? I mean, this is the Insurrection administrative narrative again. This is for the greater good. We're willing to relocate people. We're willing to kill people. We're willing to do things that are bad. But do you question at all Starfleet's recruiting ability, that they end up with not just Admiral Marcus, but a whole crew of people that are willing to jump on the ghost ship and follow orders to knock their own ships out of the sky?
Yeah, that's a hell of a lot of people that they need to run that ship. So
yeah,
it's like, wow, okay, I guess there are a lot of people who are ready to go off to war.
And that's I mean, the number of people who end up going to build that ship, the number of people who are clearly behind it, it just makes me question, again, that as much as I sort of sing the praises of the parallels between, Roddenberry's Star Trek and this sort of anti-military mentality, it's a tough sell when you start thinking too hard about the Vengeance. But the big nit I have on the Vengeance is, why didn't Kirk stun Marcus on the bridge when everybody else is stunned and he's got him? I mean, I know obviously we have to have a monologue, we have to have a chance for it, but it's just so stupid.
Yeah.
He'll stun everybody else, but not the. Just end just end it.
It's plot. There's so many issues with this. It's funny because in our Slack back channels, Nick Langdon, listener of the show, commented on all these plot holes and these issues that he had with the first Star Trek JJ reboot. And but that film is so much fun. Like I can see his points, but I don't have issues with them because I think that the film as a whole they have such a fun time with. And this one I feel like we're all going to be on the same side with this one. At least I would like to think so because
this is Nick Langdon's favorite Star Trek movie.
That's right, of all of them. Because it's just like this is where they all of these things, they just aren't done in service of a story that works on any level.
Yeah, all of these little things are harder to forgive when the setup was so poorly done. The death of the Vengeance, I think, it's a real celebration for ILM. The destruction of the Vengeance as it careens into San Francisco is a beautiful work of art. It is also another major tragedy in the narrative of the film. It destroys a lot of San Francisco, and that is largely forgotten. It's largely swept right under the rug. We don't have any sense of the gargantuan scale of what just happened here because we're focused obviously on the mano a mano chase of Spock against Khan, and I don't think the film ever really pays attention to that. This is on the order of Man of Steel, the destruction at the end of that film, and I think we had the opportunity in Man of Steel to kind of go to Batman versus Superman and have that opening sequence where we actually pay tribute to the fact that the city is being destroyed, and we get no sense of that here.
They leave out the pain and heartbreak of all that destruction just for a quick and happy ending, I guess, satisfactory ending.
Well, and I think what's so frustrating about that is that if this is a movie that's going to open with terrorism, then when you see this kind of scale of destruction here, you should pay tribute to that somehow.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like this is it's like the film sort of had a heart and forgot it and transwarp beamed it to Kronos and never got it back. And it just became a big destructathon. So.
Yeah, that's a really good point. With various people talking about how the film is current and is reflecting on things that are really happening, you think that they would take that moment to reflect on the great loss that people had and the fact that they succeeded in stopping it, but at the same time, there are losses and they need to remember those people.
Yeah. A smaller point. Remember that sequence when Kirk and Sulu are falling off of the drill in Star Trek 2009.
I sure do.
Do you remember that?
Great sequence.
It's a great scene. It's very exciting. It's exhilarating. And you think these guys are going to die. They're going to careen into the rocks on Vulcan and they're going to splat. But thankfully, Andy, Chekhov is there. And he can do that. And he runs through the halls into the transporter room because he can't, apparently, in this case, he can't run the transporter from his station. So he makes it, and he locks on, even though they're falling at terminal velocity.
Yeah.
And he gets them, both of them, separately onto the transporter pad.
It's pretty brilliant.
Why then, in this movie, Andy, we have Spock and Khan on that stupid floating platform, the Star Wars platform.
The garbage truck.
Yeah. And they're moving much slower than they were moving, than Kirk and Sulu were moving in the first movie. Why then does he say, they keep moving? I can't get the look on either of them.
Yeah.
What happened to you, Chekhov? What happened to you?
He lost confidence in himself after he lost Spock's mom.
Do you know what? That's probably the best case you could make of this whole thing. He lost his transporter mojo.
He did. It's like all it took was that one loss.
Totally.
He can't get it back.
There are some things that are really great, though. The warp effect is great. That's a kind of a quintessential thing that you look for in every Star Trek movie. How are they going to send the Enterprise to warp? It's always changed a little bit, and I really like this one. I remember being particularly moved seeing it on that huge screen in the theater. I thought it was beautiful. I love the noise in the trails. It's great.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, very shimmery and just I don't know. It's like Tinkerbell, flying through warp.
Right, exactly. We have a couple of big moments, and the one that I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about is the mutation of the final death of, in this case, Kirk. It's the homage to Spock's death in Wrath of Khan. Do you have words about that? Just a gut reaction? How does it hit you? You love it?
This fits with so many of the other elements that they pull from the Khan story. I mean, and again, this story theoretically is taking place pre-Space Siege. So this is way early, really kind of before the whole TV show. And yet here we are, pulling line after line from Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. We've got a reference right away, early in the first sequence, from Spock saying the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. We have a lot of other lines kind of throughout, even the Khan scream after, in this particular case, it's after this moment where Kirk dies, where Spock is the one who's like, Khan! And it's like they keep pulling these moments from it, and I'm just like, it's terrible. It's the writers actually said something about how it's this whole we were ever wary of the line between reimagined homage and direct ripoff, and I'm like, yeah, you were on the wrong side of that line every single time, guys. The death,
exactly right. You were on the wrong side every time.
Yeah, they just didn't know what side they were on, and the death of Kirk is swapping with Spock. Like, I could do nothing but think about the whole thing as being just so flat, because I was just like, they're just trying to hit note for note of the previous one, and it's just not working.
That's my sense exactly, even though I have to say their location, shooting the location of the Enterprise's warp core, that whole set shot at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory is very cool. I loved that they gave us finally, I think, a warp core that makes sense to me. Like, it makes sense. So that was, it's good. It's good. 1,000 paper cuts. Scotty resigns.
Yeah, this is just one. It felt like a screenplay trope. It's like, oh, well, we have to create this conflict between the characters so that one of them will resign. And then, of course, that conveniently puts him into a position where he can sneak aboard the Vengeance as one of their, quote, crew members. It just felt tried and frustrating.
Very frustrating, and although I have to say, I do like that Keenser goes with him and that they end up drinking together, and I think they have a fun relationship that I would have liked to have seen explored better. I do like, however, the when we talk about the ship-to-ship jump, right? This is the parallel to the drill jump, the space jump from the first movie. Now we're putting them in essentially the same outfits, and we're going to send them from the Enterprise to the Vengeance. And Scotty's going to be there. He's going to open the hangar, and they're going to be able to shoot right in, and it'll be perfect. That was a very cool sequence.
It was a very cool sequence, and it's incredible to watch them actually shooting it and see some of the way that they're doing the wire rigs and stuff, especially like the last part when they're flying into the kind of the hangar bay of the Vengeance when Scotty's catching them. It's just a trip to see these guys on wires just zipping along as fast. I mean, really, it's all they were really doing was painting out wires. I mean, they're just moving as that fast and landing on the ground. It's insane. But it's just a fun sequence. It really was exhilarating. I thought it was just very kinetic, very energetic. It felt a lot like the good stuff that we were getting so much of in the first film.
I don't think we can underscore just how cool that sequence when they come into the hangar is, and just how cool it was to shoot. I mean, you say, they were painting out wires, but because they found the coolest location ever to shoot this in camera, the Spruce Goose hangar in Los Angeles is, they just really painted the floor black and did some cool things with the studio lights, or just using stage lighting to black out the walls. But they didn't do anything to the walls. It's just what you see in there is what was in there largely. And apparently, a lot of the just sort of rigging that's along the sidewalls is just stunt rigging that they were using for the movie, and they just kind of put it in shadow, but you see it.
Yeah.
And I think that is what I think of when I think of JJ Abrams as a filmmaker. That it's just a clever solution and creating a very cool, practical shot that works brilliantly in the sequence.
Absolutely. The way that they take practical effects and find ways to do them where they can kind of do it all in camera and they can make these really fun things happen right before your eyes. It brings so much to the performances of the actors. It brings a lot more energy to it. It just creates this whole vibe. And I really feel that when I watch sequences like this in Abrams films.
Have we exhausted our list of Star Trek nerd questions?
This is just one last small nerd question, I think, for you. So Kirk says this is before they leave for their 5-year mission, which, as we know, that's kind of the whole premise of the TV series, is they're on their 5-year mission to explore new worlds, et cetera, et cetera. But he says they're the first to go on one of these 5-year missions. Has that always been the case? Because I know there were previous Enterprises and stuff, but what's the scoop here?
That is actually a great Star Trek nerd question. I think that's legit because although it seems it's legit but really strange because they built it's not just about the first the previous Enterprises. There is a fleet. There is a fleet of starships that are meant to travel great distances already. The Kelvin is one of them. We already blew that up, and it was clearly expendable enough. There must be others, right? It's not like that was the only ship, and so I think it's a little bit strange and. Again, tilting too far toward fan service to bring up the 5-year mission when it's no longer plausible, right? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. There is a robust Starfleet at this point, and a robust sort of. I just think they're getting lazy, and they wanted to throw in some buzzwords.
That's what it felt like to me, and that's why I wanted to ask it, because it seemed like one of these crazy things. It's like, how can they be the first ones to be going on a 5-year mission like this? I mean, especially, and this is looking ahead to our next film. I know we haven't started talking about it yet, but I mean, they are way out beyond, where they've ever gone, deep in their 5-year mission in the next film. And they come across another ship, another Federation ship that had been out there for, I don't remember how long, like 100 years or something like that. It's like, that. Don't tell me that was like just a 1-year trip that they got them that far. I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
Andy, don't make me get mad at that movie prematurely. We're not there yet, man. Breaks.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm not getting mad at that movie. I'm getting mad at this movie for bringing up this silly idea.
You're right. Thanks for the pivot. That helps.
Yeah. See, there you go.
Do you have any? Do we have any good backstory on this one? It feels very much like, hey, let's do another one of the thing that we just did.
It does, but I thought it was interesting because reading about it, they said that originally they conceived this as a retelling of Heart of Darkness. And I was like, wow, they really went off the trail for that one.
Did any of them read it?
Yeah, other than maybe like keeping darkness in the title. It's like maybe that's all that's as far as they got. The only other thing I found that was kind of interesting was that they actually had been talking to Benicio del Toro as to play the villain of the film. He ended up bowing out, and then they were talking to Demian Bichir as the villain, and that didn't pan out when they brought Benedict Cumberbatch on board. But I was like, those are some really interesting characters, some great actors to potentially have played Khan. I think both of them are very compelling. I don't know if I would have preferred either of them over Cumberbatch. I think I enjoyed Cumberbatch in this, except when he's speaking. There's something about like those big enunciated moments that are really awkward. But otherwise, I think I do kind of enjoy his presence in the film.
I really enjoyed his work, except when he was awake. I'm with you, although I have to say, I know I can pretty much predict what we would have gotten with Benicio del Toro. I have a sense of who he is. I have no idea what we would have gotten out of Demian Bichir, and that makes me really excited. I think that could have been very cool.
Right?
And yeah, I think I know Benedict Cumberbatch is capable of some wonderful stuff, and I feel like this is just a collective misunderstanding of the character as it exists in my head.
Right.
Why didn't they ask me, Andy? Let's do the deep scene dive.
Deep scene dive, yeah.
For the deep scene dive in this film, we're going to do the first scene. We're dropped into a red...
Let's correct that. We're doing the first sequence.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. That's fair.
This is a massive 10-minute chunk of celluloid.
We're doing the first act. We are dropped into a red forested world, as we see from our now more experienced crew. They are at work. They are running from tribespeople, and they are clearly about to do something big for these people. We don't quite know what it is this early on, but over the course of our 10 minutes together, we do.
It's an interesting sequence. I think that we decided to go with this one because of some of the elements that it really is emphasizing here as far as the Prime Directive and everything. And I think there are a couple points of the Prime Directive that are interesting. One, I will point out, and this actually got me quite excited when I watched it. This is a group of Starfleet officers who they go down to this primitive planet that is pre what did they call them? Pre-warp. I can't remember. There was a term that they had as far as the class of planet, where they basically these people they haven't even discovered spaceflight or anything. It's very, very primitive. And unlike Star Trek Nemesis, where as soon as the natives start showing up and attacking them, they attack right back and start blowing all up. These guys, they're getting spears thrown at them and everything, and they don't do anything but run. I was very happy to see that. They did a good job of not attacking, and I appreciated the effort there. That being said, there is another element to the Prime Directive, and I'm going to pass it over to you to bring this one up.
Well, and I feel like I just have one more hallelujah about the sequence, right? Because before I start pulling it apart, because I think what the sequence does very, very well is it shows the crew at work. It gives us an entree into every one of their lives, and they all have a job. We've got, Sulu and Uhura and Spock are up in the shuttle above this volcano. We have Spock getting ready in his fancy heat suit to fall down into the volcano and freeze it to prevent the volcano from exploding, erupting, and killing the civilization, this pre-warp civilization. We've got, obviously, McCoy and Kirk are running from the tribespeople. They were to serve as a distraction, and they are running through this red forest. And we discover soon that Scotty is back on the Enterprise, and they're trying their best to track everybody because the Enterprise is underwater in the ocean. But what they do here, in spite of all of the things that we have a problem with, what they do is they do a great job of getting us into the crew's life immediately, quickly, efficiently. And we got to celebrate that, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. What I liked about this is it felt like an element from a TV episode. It felt very much like, we've got to stop this volcano from destroying this tribe. We've got to sneak this out. It felt very much like something having to do with the show. And I liked the feel. I really enjoyed the feel, the energy, the camaraderie, the comedy. Just everything really was kind of working for me.
Yes, it feels good. And then you stop and you think about it for just not very long. And maybe some things occur to you. Like, for example, the Prime Directive fallacy. They hang their hats on the fact that the Prime Directive is all about not being seen doing stuff to this planet, right? It's not being seen by the locals as you're about to save their lives. But you know what? We have to look at what the Prime Directive is really all about, right? And Picard is one of the great sort of the bastions of Prime Directive lore, right? He is constantly quoting the Prime Directive. He says the Prime Directive is not just a set of rules, it's a philosophy, right? It's a very correct one. He says history has proven again and again that whatever mankind interferes with a less developed civilization, no matter how well-intentioned that interference may be, the results are invariably disastrous. And so here we are. After the sequence, we have Spock saying, "You should not have done this. You should not have come to save me because of your actions, we were seen by the locals, and therefore we violated the Prime Directive." And oh my God, the end of the world. But the truth is, according to Trek lore, helping a society escape a natural disaster known to the society, even if inaction would result in a society's extinction, is in fact, in canon, a violation of the Prime Directive. Taking actions to generally affect a society's overall development is a violation of the Prime Directive. They shouldn't have been in the volcano in the first place. Makes a fun set piece, but it is an absolute violation of their whole purpose of Starfleet. So that they make this big deal about the fact that Kirk actually saved Spock's life is a very frustrating thing, because it is an incomplete thing to be frustrated about.
Well, and again, just going back to the problems with the script, it speaks of these screenwriters' need to say, hey, let's find ways to introduce some of the great quotes from Wrath of Khan. In this case, it's the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, which Spock says as he's in the volcano, because he is risking his own life to save this tribe, right? And it's a very frustrating realization when you see that that's really essentially why they're here doing this. And the whole idea of the ship being underwater, that was just an idea that Kurtzman came up with as they were coming up with the concept for the script. He just thought it'd be a great image, seeing the Enterprise rising out of the ocean, as illogical as that is. So you start getting these pieces and you realize it's just built on so many frustrating elements. And it's so frustrating for me, because I really, really enjoy this whole opening sequence.
Yeah, the water thing is really stupid. And I guess I'm sort of with Kurtzman. It's a cool image, like on a poster.
Yeah.
But as soon as you start thinking about why would they choose to do that? I love that they're capable of doing it. I love that you could even explain away the technology. I mean, it's a spaceship. It's got to be sealed. It's pressure sealed, right?
Yeah, right.
So obviously, it's. I guess we could say that it's capable of doing it. I don't think thrust works the same way underwater as it does in space and in atmosphere. I think we're kind of letting a lot of things slide there. But why would you want to? Why would you want to do that? That shuttlecraft can leave the Enterprise, whether it's in orbit in space where the natives can't see these people anyway, or whether it comes out of the belly underwater. There's no point to it. And I think, this whole idea of, doing it in secret, putting this giant spaceship right immediately off the coast of this country, and trying to be secretive about it it's just lunacy.
It really is. It's the tribes people's home is not that far from the cliff. And they obviously got the ship down into the ocean. I mean, just because this is going back to our little Indiana Jones thing, just because you don't see it on screen, the filmmakers are saying, oh, it's not really, nobody notices it because it didn't happen in context of our frame. That's nonsense, because somehow that ship had to get into the ocean in the first place, which means it had to come down and land in it somehow. So it's all nonsense.
It is all nonsense. The cast on screen that we have here, the usual suspects: Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto, Zoe Saldana, Carl Urban, Simon Pegg, John Cho, Anton Yelchin, and Jeremy Raymond as the lead Nibiran, Tony Guma as Nibiran, and Gary Seven as Nibiran Elder.
I want to see him sign his name.
I would like to see him.
Because it's like Gary hyphen the number 7.
There are some really wonderful things going on here from an effects perspective. This is an ILM, another ILM treat. They only had, I think what they say, 60, 80 feet of runway through the forest, through the red forest, and they just built it in a parking lot, painted everything red, and started running rails back and forth, having Kirk and McCoy and the tribes people running laps back and forth on this thing. And they turned it out to a really compelling forest.
It's a fantastic set. I absolutely love just the look of it, the feel of it. This feels like an actual world that I'm so impressed with this world. It's like Star Wars hasn't done this, and they've done all sorts of crazy worlds. And here we have this really unique world that I was so excited about, learning about how they painted all these trees white. They attached dozens and dozens of leaves of the red leaves to the trees, and they built this whole thing themselves. They spray painted shag carpet red to make it like the mossy ground. I love it. It's such a gorgeous location. Not to mention the Niborans. I think these people with kind of their funky double nostrils and their kind of the white mud coated bodies, they might be my second favorite kind of random aliens in the Star Trek universe behind the Sona.
Wow.
I think they are so fascinating to look at. I'm mesmerized by just the really interesting feel they have. They feel like an actual tribe. Like I buy it, and I think that's impressive.
Yeah, I thought it was really great, and I think the overall design of the effect, jumping off the cliff into the water, and recognizing that they're not really jumping off of that cliff, everything is just so seamlessly tied together. The entire universe of this planet is just so seamlessly designed. It's really beautiful. The costumes, I think, play perfectly. The sort of gold of the robes on the Niborans it so perfectly complements the makeup design work and of these people, and the effects work on their eyes, and the color palette between them and the red of the forest. I think everything just works so well. They didn't need to go to Hawaii.
No, they didn't. It all worked perfectly in this little creation that they made. Yeah. So Giacchino's score is great through this whole sequence. A lot of energy, nice little hints of the theme as it kicks in. Everything. I was really impressed with everything going on throughout this sequence, except for some of the story problems that we have that are very frustrating.
Damn it, man! That was our ride! You just stunned our ride! Great. Run! What the hell did you take? I have no idea, but they were vowing to it. Kirk to Shuttle 1. Locals are out of the kill zone. You're clear. Repeat. Spock, get in there. Neutralize the volcano. Let's get out of here.
You're good.
We're gonna do this. We gotta do it now. This ash is killing our coils.
You sure you don't want me to go instead?
That would be highly illogical, as I am already outfitted in heat resistant.
I was kidding. You got this.
Guys, we have to go now.
Other cast and crew, Andy, not necessarily in this sequence. You found a couple of fun casting notes.
Yeah, there are a couple of interesting little points that I caught. The first one was that Bill Hader is the voice of the computer voice of the USS Vengeance. It was kind of a fun little voice to see thrown in there.
I can't even picture it. Did you I only know that because you put it in the notes, and I can't in my head even picture his. Do you know it? Like, can you pick it out?
I don't. I don't remember honestly the voice of the USS Vengeance coming up. But I do recall as I was watching it, just in my head, I'm like, oh, it's interesting that they went with a male voice for this ship as opposed to a female voice. That was like my only thought when I was watching the movie. So now I'm curious
anti-Enterprise,
to go back and
man. Anti-Enterprise.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The other one, which really kind of surprised me, was seeing that Heather Langenkamp. Anyone who is a fan of the Nightmare on Elm Street films would recognize that name. Good old Heather Langenkamp pops up in the strangest little bit part that really surprised me. She plays a character named Moto. Do you know who Moto is, Pete?
I'm embarrassed to say that I do not.
I didn't either, and it was only when I searched for it online that it popped up. Moto is the funky little alien creature that looks like it has a big watermelon head and kind of a pouty toad mouth. That is basically, I guess you could say, the prison or the brig warden. It's the person sitting outside of the brig when Kirk is talking to Khan, like through the big glass wall in their brig, and there's this little watermelon head lady like sitting there, like the head of the brig. That is Moto.
I am looking at pictures of it right now, and the makeup is amazing. You can't tell that that's Heather Langenkamp. I mean, maybe a little in the eyebrows.
And so here's the reason why Heather Langenkamp ended up playing Moto, Pete. Heather Langenkamp has kind of like had a total career shift and actually has become a makeup artist. She has a makeup studio. Her makeup studio, I think, is AFX Makeup. And she got into it when I think it was her husband. I feel like she met him when doing like Nightmare on Elm Street and all that sort of stuff. And she was just like, let's make one for me to wear. And so they came up with this character Moto, and that's who she ended up being, because it was something that her husband had kind of come up with in the design work for this film.
That's fantastic. You go, Heather Langenkamp.
Absolutely.
All right. What else do we need to know here? How do you take me into facts and tidbits, Andy?
Not much other that I thought it was interesting in the early development stages of this project. Nimoy, apparently Leonard Nimoy said at one point that he wasn't interested in being involved in another Star Trek film. And so they actually were considering bringing William Shatner in. And I was just like, how in God's name would they have figured that out? It's like, I was frustrated that was an idea that they had been considering. I'm glad it didn't work out, because I actually do like Nimoy in this, and I feel like one powerful moment that I feel there is in this film is when he's talking to his younger self about Khan and how difficult that was in his past.
Grist for the mill, Lieutenant. How did it do in awards season?
It wasn't quite as popular as the previous film. It did get one Oscar nomination for Best Achievement in Visual Effects. Same thing at the BAFTAs. It lost in both cases to Gravity. That was a pretty effective film. I think that it's probably fair to say that Gravity deserved to take it in those cases, wouldn't you?
Yeah, probably.
At the Saturn Awards, we always bring up the Saturn Awards. It had 5 nominations at the Saturn Awards. Best Sci-Fi Film, lost to Gravity. Best Supporting Actor, Benedict Cumberbatch. He lost to Ben Kingsley for Iron Man 3. Best Director, JJ Abrams lost to Alfonso Cuarón for Gravity. Best Costumes, lost to The Hunger Games, Catching Fire. And Best Special Effects, also lost to Gravity. Something interesting that I noticed in its list of awards, it was actually nominated for a few Annie Awards, which are the animation awards. I didn't realize, and I guess I just hadn't been paying attention to the Annie Awards, that they had started adding some live-action animated awards in here. And it actually did get 2 nominations for Outstanding Achievement in Animated Effects in a Live-Action Production, which I think is fantastic that they have this award now. Interestingly, it actually had 2 separate teams nominated in the category. I couldn't find out what those teams had specifically done as to what work they had done that got them the nomination. But in both cases, they ended up losing to Pacific Rim.
That was a big film right there. That's what that was. How did it do in the box office?
Well, JJ's Khan redo ended up being the most expensive Star Trek film to make, whether you're looking at adjusted numbers or not, costing $190 million or $195.7 million in today's dollars. Luckily, it was a financial success and made its money back. The movie opened May 16th, 2013, and aside from some limited releases, pretty much had the weekend to itself, easily taking the #1 spot. Plus, it was a Wednesday opening, so it had more time to really build up its box office take before Fast and the Furious 6 opened a week and a half later, knocking it out of the #1 spot. Khan Redux was in the top 10 for 6 weeks and went on to make $228.8 million domestically and $238.6 million internationally for a total of $481.4 million in adjusted dollars. That gives it an adjusted profit per finished minute of $2.2 million, putting it in third place behind Star Trek IV and the original Star Trek the Motion Picture, making it the most profitable of all of the reboots. But with it costing as much as it did, its profit to cost ratio actually puts it in 7th place in the franchise.
Well, that actually makes me curious about where we're gonna go next week, because I wonder if I'm curious about a potential slump. You probably already know the answer to that.
I do know the answer to that, and I guess you'll have to wait till next week to find out.
Overall, this was not the movie I wanted it to be, and I think I'm judging it probably a little bit unfairly in that regard, because I had deeply hoped for more, different, other, whatever, but given the story that it is just riddled with holes that I have a very difficult time forgiving, because it's not as much fun as the last one. And I think that's where I'm landing. It's still a Star Trek movie, and the action sequences are largely terrific. And as soon as I distance myself from it, I'm able to give it a little bit more love, but not a whole lot. I was hoping I'd be able to come up with more, and you didn't do a very good job of selling me on that.
And blame it on me, huh? It's a frustrating film, and I agree with you. It's a film that when I'm not watching it in context of the whole franchise, and I'm just kind of taking it for what it is, I feel like I can go a little easier on it. In context of everything else that we've been doing here, I find that it ends up being a much more frustrating watch, and it made me much more critical of it. And I mean, there are good elements within the context of the film. I do like a number of things that do happen in the film, and you're right, the action sequences are energetic and exciting. It's just those things, when I start thinking about it, I just get really frustrated. And the fact that they went back to Khan, for me, it's something that I feel is just an unforgivable thing that they should never have done.
Absolutely agree. And with that, Andy, it's time to rank it.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel, and you'll see our list of all of the movies we've talked about on this show, nay, hundreds of them. And we'll see where Star Trek Into Darkness fits on the list. Or you can just swipe over in your mobile device and you'll see the word. It just says Flickchart in the show notes. And if you tap that, it'll take you right to this movie so you can add it to your list. Where do we start?
First up, Star Trek Into Darkness, or the Oh Brother block, Pete. Oh Brother, where art thou?
Oh, it's not going to get past it this time.
No, Oh Brother.
Mm-hmm.
Star Trek Into Darkness, or Atlantic City.
This is, I probably shouldn't be so hard.
It shouldn't be. I feel like I would say Atlantic City because I think it's just a better movie. But Star Trek is at least a little more fun to watch.
Yeah, I'll give you Atlantic City.
Star Trek Into Darkness, or Gone with the Wind.
Star Trek Into Darkness.
I'm really tempted to say Gone with the Wind on this one, but I'm not going to. Star Trek Into Darkness, or From Hell.
Star Trek Into Darkness, please.
I'm actually going to say From Hell on this one. I ended up enjoying that so much more this time.
I'm going to give you From Hell because it prevents us from having to do anything synchronized around timing.
Okay. Next up, this one's going to be easy for me. Star Trek Into Darkness, Pete, or Volunteers.
Oh, for crying out loud. Where did this little cockroach sneak up from? I mean, we haven't had to rank this against anything in forever.
Volunteers,
I'm going to have to let you take this one.
You, sir, are a gentleman and a scholar. You're probably the first person to be called a scholar for choosing volunteers. Or for anything.
Right.
Star Trek Into Darkness, or John Carpenter's Escape from New York.
Star Trek Into Darkness.
Yep, I'll go with Into Darkness. Here we go. More in the Abrams world, Star Trek Into Darkness, or Cloverfield.
Oh, Cloverfield.
Cloverfield, definitely. Well, that lands Star Trek Into Darkness at 276 on our chart. 276 out of 321.
And how does this fare for your personal flick chart?
I looked at my flick chart to see where it sat, and it was, it was about, in the bottom quarter is about where it sat. I re-ranked it a few times and it kind of went up and down. I would think about it and I'd go, it's okay. And then I'd re-rank it. No, I really think it's, I don't like it that much. It really bounced around. It finally settled at 29.79 out of 38.43. So it actually dropped in my rankings, and it's now at about 23%.
Mine is, wow, it's not as far down as yours. I was surprised that it's not as far down as yours, given how I've been talking about it. It's right at 535 out of 999, and it should probably be a little bit lower. Those were the movies it ran into. I don't know, the Star Wars Holiday Special. I would watch this first. So it landed where it landed, and that should give me, it suggests a 2.5 star on Letterboxd. I'm going to give it a 2 star on Letterboxd, and that feels probably a little harsh. We'll see how it sits, but I'm not as excited as I thought I would be after watching it critically this time to go back and watch it again. I don't have any interest in doing that.
Yeah, it's other than maybe some sequences. I would go back and watch some sequences here and there because I do think there are some great sequences scattered throughout. But I'm right at about a 2, and according to my rating where I put it on Flickchart, it should be about a 1 star. I feel like the where it ended up on Flickchart, I don't think it always equates very well to the stars. I think 2 stars is pretty fair. And when I looked at the films that it was in the midst of, I feel like they're all kind of in that range. So I felt like it was in an okay spot as a 2-star film. And I'd say it's a 2-star, and I like it because there are a lot of elements that I do like. And as frustrating as it is in a lot of aspects, there are some really enjoyable aspects.
I agree with you, Andy. I'll give it a like 2.
All right, there it sits.
So 2 and a like because of Heather Langenkamp.
I give the like to Heather.
That's right. So that's it. This was our penultimate film in the series. Where do we go from here?
Holy cow. We are at the end of our monster Star Trek marathon. We are going to be hitting Star Trek Beyond, the 50th anniversary film that came out last year. We're going to be closing out this series with that film next week.
I'm sort of surprised, as long as we've been talking about Star Trek, that they haven't actually released the next Star Trek movie.
Right?
I'm very excited. We have to hurry up and get into next week so that we can beat the next Star Trek movie because Andy, when the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Amazon giveth, Andy.
As Amazon always doeth.
I'm going with a 1 star, and I think I went with a 1 star because of the lowbrow title.
Okay.
A series boldly going flashy and dumb by a customer. Star Trek Into Dumbness. I said that. Join vastly overrated director JJ Abrams and comically inept writers Orsi, Kurtzman, and Lindelof. Seriously, will these guys take a break from ruining sci-fi? As they take one final stab at perverting the Star Trek brand before moving on to other, inevitably poorly done sci-fi projects. Watch as familiar characters are fleshed out, not at all, instead relying on throwing an occasional curveball at preconceived notions so that no more than the bare minimum of time is used to develop them. Put aside your disbelief as transporter technology in the future will work solely as a lazy plot device, operating only as a means to set up the next silly action sequence. Suspend any knowledge of physics as well as your common sense for such scenes as spaceship underwater, spaceship pulled out of orbit within seconds, characters foregoing use of shuttlecraft to approach disabled ship, and many, many, crushingly many more. Most of all, prepare yourself for the most stupidly unbelievable thing of all, the characters' motivations. This is a movie that doesn't fail and fail badly because it's a reboot or even for being unoriginal. It's a movie that fails because it's so jaw-droppingly filled with terrible plotting and hollow action. I was a little bit long-winded, but mostly it agrees with us, so I had to read the whole thing.
Very nice. Well, I went the opposite direction, Pete, and I went for straight to the positive end of the spectrum, went to the 5 stars.
Bold
Because,
man.
somebody out there loves it. Somebody. A lot of somebodies, actually. This is a 5-star by Loving Chloe 67, who says, this movie made me a true fan. I loved it. It is so full of action and drama, and the characters of the Enterprise were intense. And who knew that Dr. Spock and Uhura had a thing going on? I think I loved that part the most.
My God, man, we all knew that Spock and Uhura had a thing going on. All of us knew that.
Loving Chloe 67 did not catch that in the first film.
She knows it takes place in space too, right? Did she catch that?
No idea. Blew her mind.
Jeez. Thanks, Amazon.
It's hard to believe that we've been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
You're telling me producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great conversations.
I was so excited for our big Star Trek film franchise series this season. All those movies adapted from Gene Roddenberry's original 1960s TV show.
As a huge fan, I know that you geeked out over analyzing the adaptations.
Absolutely. From the motion picture to the Kelvin timeline films, seeing the Enterprise cruise on the big screen was a dream come true.
Our list of source material isn't just all books and plays. We have the original series in our list of source material. You can rent the episodes to watch and enjoy, and support the show in the process.
For our Millennium Trilogy series, we covered films adapted from the original books that launched Lisbeth Salander, the girl with the dragon tattoo, the girl who played with fire, and the girl who kicked the hornet's nest.
As much as I love Fincher's version, the original Swedish versions are the way to go. We also did our Die Hard series in season 7.
I can't believe Die Hard and Die Hard 2 were adaptations. Two of the greatest action movies ever.
Well, one of them at least. The other is awfully fun, though. We revisited the classic Mary Poppins for our 1960s movie musical series. A spoonful of sugar always helps the medicine go down.
Old Boy was intense for our Park Chan-wook Vengeance trilogy. And East of Eden and Giant were highlights of our James Dean series.
And a fun time travel mind bender with Predestination to cap things off.
Find all the books behind these adaptations and more at thenextreel.com/originals.
Dive into the source material for your favorite movies. Check it out today, thenextreel.com/originals.